The night Sandra destroyed my life. She kissed me before walking on stage. That's the part people never believe. Her lipstick was still on my cheek when the projector behind her lit up with pictures of another man holding her waist in hotel mirrors I had paid for. 300 people turned to look at me at the same time. I remember the silence more than the humiliation. Silence has weight. It presses on your lungs until breathing feels disrespectful. Sandra smiled into the microphone like she was accepting an award. "My fiancé Frank," she said, "deserves honesty tonight." Everybody laughed nervously because they thought it was a joke. I laughed too. That's the terrifying thing about heartbreak. Sometimes your body protects you by making you stupid for a few seconds. Then the next photo appeared. Sandra in bed, another man shirtless beside her. Date stamps, vacation pictures, months of betrayal, organized like a PowerPoint presentation from hell. Someone in the audience dropped a wine glass. I heard my mother whisper, "Oh God," and Sandra kept smiling. "I didn't want to start a marriage with lies," she said calmly, like she deserved applause for stabbing me publicly. The same woman who used to cry because I forgot to text goodnight. The same woman who once made me drive 40 minutes because she was emotionally cold and needed cuddles. Meanwhile, she had another man treating our relationship as a group project. I stood there frozen while people avoided eye contact. My best friend David looked ready to fight somebody. Sandra's sister was crying harder than Sandra herself. And somehow the only thing my brain could think was, she still borrowed my Netflix account yesterday. That's how denial works. Your heart is being buried alive and your mind is worried about streaming passwords. Then Sandra looked directly at me and said the sentence that nearly broke me permanently. "I stayed because Frank is safe." She whispered, "Safe, not loved, not irreplaceable, safe." Like I was a warm waiting room she planned to leave eventually. I wanted to scream. Instead I nodded slowly, grabbed the engagement ring box from my pocket, walked onto the stage, and placed it beside her glass of champagne. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I leaned toward the microphone and said, "At least now I know why your phone battery died every night at exactly 11 p.m. Half the room gasped. The other half laughed accidentally. Sandra's smile vanished for the first time. That tiny crack in her composure saved me, because in that moment, I realized something horrifying. She didn't expect me to survive the humiliation. She expected me to collapse. And suddenly, I wanted revenge more than closure. 3 weeks later, people online still called us relationship goals. That was the funny part. Our photos were everywhere. Couple vacations, matching pajamas, birthday surprises, Sandra kissing my forehead at restaurants like she was auditioning for sainthood. Strangers commented things like, "Real love still exists." Meanwhile, I was learning heartbreak has a smell, whiskey, old hoodies, takeout containers, and silence at 2 a.m. I stopped answering calls, stopped shaving, stopped opening curtains. David came over one afternoon, stared at me for 10 seconds, and said, "Brother, you look like unemployment." I laughed so hard, I nearly cried. That's the dangerous thing about pain mixed with humor. Sometimes laughter sounds exactly like grief. David forced me outside that evening. We sat in a small roadside restaurant where the waiter kept calling me boss with unnecessary confidence. Sandra used to love that place. Every caller carried memories like landmines. The waitress asked if Sandra was joining us. David kicked me under the table before I answered. Too late. I still broke a little. That night, after too many drinks and terrible advice from David, I made the mistake that changed everything. I checked Sandra's social media. There she was, laughing on a yacht with the same man. His name was Marcus, investment consultant, perfect beard, the kind of guy who looked like he moisturized emotionally. Sandra posted a caption that said, "Choosing happiness finally, finally," as if loving me had been community service. The comments destroyed me more than the post itself. "You look alive again. He treats you better. Upgrade. Upgrade." Like I was an outdated phone plan. I stared at the screen until my chest hurt. Then I noticed something strange. Marcus wore the exact watch Sandra bought me 6 months earlier. Same scratch near the clasp. Same custom engraving. My stomach dropped. Sandra had given him my watch. The watch she claimed came from her late grandfather's collection. I laughed so hard the bartender asked if I was okay. Apparently, I said. Her grandfather also cheats. But underneath the sarcasm, something darker started growing. Questions, tiny details suddenly connecting themselves. The business trips, the sudden gym obsession, the night she cried randomly after sex, the passwords changing, the way she sometimes stared at me like she felt guilty for existing. Then David said something that shifted the entire story. You know what scares me? I looked at him. She humiliated you too confidently. I frowned. She knew something. He continued quietly. She expected you to stay quiet afterward. And just like that, my heartbreak became suspicion. I found the first secret by accident. Sandra still used my cloud storage account. Not because she trusted me. Because arrogant people eventually stop hiding. I logged in one sleepless night, intending to delete old photos. Instead I found folders. Hundreds of them. Receipts, videos, voice recordings, conversations. At first I thought Sandra was documenting her affair like some emotionally unstable filmmaker. Then I opened one file, and my blood turned cold. Sandra wasn't cheating only on me. She was manipulating Marcus too. There were voice notes of her mocking him to friends. He thinks I love him. She laughed in one recording. He's just richer than Frank. I sat there stunned. Then another file opened. This time Sandra was crying. Real crying. Not the elegant movie tears she used in public. Panicked crying. I can't keep both lives together. She whispered. Both lives. That sentence haunted me. Then came the biggest shock. There was another man. Not Marcus. Someone named Eric. Older, married, powerful. The messages between them made my stomach twist. Eric funded Sandra's startup secretly, paid her rent before we met, bought her first car, and according to one message, he also controlled almost everything in her life. Suddenly the perfect relationship was different. Sandra wasn't just a villain. She was trapped inside a machine built on lies. But heartbreak doesn't disappear because you discover context. Pain simply changes clothes. I kept digging. Then I found the video. Sandra recording herself after our engagement dinner. Mascara ruined. Hands shaking. I wish I loved Frank correctly. She whispered. That sentence hit harder than the cheating. Because deep down, I believed her. She did love me. Just not enough to stop destroying me. And somehow that hurt more. I should have walked away permanently then. Instead I made another mistake. I called her. She answered immediately. No hello. Just breathing. Heavy breathing. Like she'd been waiting beside the phone. Why did you humiliate me publicly? I asked. Silence. Then Sandra whispered something that changed the entire war. Because if I left quietly, he would have hurt you. The room went still. Who? I asked. She hung up. 5 minutes later, my apartment power went out. 10 minutes later, someone knocked slowly on my door. Not aggressively, patiently, like they already knew I was inside. I looked through the peephole. Nobody there. Only a small black envelope on the floor. Inside was one photograph. A picture of me sleeping in my apartment, taken recently. On the back, one sentence was written. Some relationships are expensive to leave. For the first time in my life, I became afraid of love physically, not emotionally, physically. I started checking windows twice, avoiding routines, watching parked cars too long. David thought I was losing my mind until I showed him the photograph. His face changed instantly. You need police, he said. But I already knew this wasn't normal danger. This felt organized, controlled, like invisible hands rearranging my life quietly. Then Sandra appeared outside my apartment at 1:13 a.m. Heavy rain. No makeup, no designer clothes, no performance, just fear, real fear. She looked smaller somehow. Human. I almost slammed the door. Instead I asked the dumbest question possible. Did you eat? Even betrayed men can be embarrassing sometimes. Sandra laughed through tears. That's still your first instinct. I hated myself for caring. She stepped inside trembling. Then finally, the truth started bleeding out. Eric wasn't just her ex-lover. He used women, controlled businesses through them, moved money through fake companies. Sandra tried leaving him 2 years earlier. That's when she met me. At first you were an escape, she admitted quietly. Pain sliced through me again. But then, I asked. She looked down. Then you became the only real thing in my life. I wanted to believe her. I also wanted to throw her out the window. Both emotions sat beside each other like roommates. Sandra explained the public humiliation finally. Eric suspected she loved me genuinely. He monitored her constantly. Phones, accounts, movements. If she disappeared peacefully with me, he would retaliate. So you destroyed me to protect me? I asked bitterly. I made you hate me, she whispered. Hatred survives easier than grief. That line stayed in my chest, like broken glass. Then came another twist. Marcus wasn't her real boyfriend either. He was connected to Eric financially. The yacht photos, staged. The relationship posts, calculated. Everything designed to separate Sandra from me publicly. I should have felt relieved. Instead I felt exhausted. Imagine discovering your heartbreak was basically corporate terrorism. Life becomes ridiculous at that point. Then Sandra finally admitted the one thing I already feared. Eric thinks you know too much now. Right after she said it, headlights flooded my apartment windows. 3 black SUVs parked outside simultaneously. Sandra went pale instantly. Don't open the door, she whispered. Someone downstairs began knocking, slowly, patiently, the same terrifying rhythm from before. And suddenly I understood something horrifying. The relationship that looked perfect from the outside was never really about love. It was survival. People think revenge feels explosive. Truthfully, revenge feels patient, cold, organized, like slowly sharpening a knife while smiling politely. For 2 months, David, Sandra, and I collected evidence against Eric quietly. Bank transfers, recordings, bribery files, shell companies, every secret hidden beneath expensive suits and charity events. Meanwhile, the internet still mocked me. Memes about the public breakup guy. Reaction videos analyzing Sandra humiliating me. One woman on TikTok said, I looked emotionally unemployed. Honestly, fair enough. But while everybody laughed at my downfall, Eric felt untouchable. That arrogance became his weakness. Sandra played her role perfectly. She attended events with Marcus, smiled for cameras, pretended loyalty. Meanwhile, every dinner conversation was secretly recorded. I watched the woman who broke my heart risk her life trying to fix it. And somehow that became harder to process than the betrayal itself. One night I asked her, why come back for me? Sandra stared out the window quietly. Because you were the only person who loved me before knowing what I could offer. No dramatic music, no cinematic kiss, just painful honesty sitting between us. Then came the gala night, Eric's biggest charity fundraiser, politicians, business executives, news cameras everywhere. Sandra wore the same red dress from our engagement party, the dress that once destroyed me publicly. This time, it looked like war armor. David nearly cried laughing when he saw me wearing a tuxedo again. Brother, he said, if this goes wrong, at least die elegant. We entered the ballroom separately. Eric stood near the stage, shaking hands like a saint manufactured in a laboratory. Then he saw me. His smile tightened slightly. Tiny reaction, but enough. Sandra approached him first, kissed his cheek, played her role flawlessly. I wanted to hate her for how convincing she was. Instead, I realized something devastating. She had been performing Survivor 4 years. Halfway through the event, Eric began his speech about integrity and community leadership. That was our signal. David hacked the projector feed remotely, and suddenly the ballroom screens changed. Bank statements, audio recordings, photos, wire transfers, women crying in hidden camera clips. Eric froze mid-sentence. The room exploded into confusion. Then Sandra stepped onto the stage slowly. This time, the microphone trembled in her hands. Not from manipulation, from fear, real fear. My name is Sandra Brooks, she said shakily. And 4 years, I helped this man destroy people because I was too afraid to leave. Gasps spread instantly. Eric lunged toward her. Security stopped him. Cameras flashed everywhere. Then Sandra looked directly at me in front of the entire room and finally said the words I spent months dying to hear. "I loved Frank," she whispered. "I just hated myself more." Eric was arrested 3 days later. News channels devoured the scandal for weeks. People who mocked me online suddenly called me resilient. Funny how society changes opinions once pain becomes inspirational instead of entertaining. Marcus disappeared completely. Apparently even emotionally moisturized men have limits. Sandra moved into a small apartment across town under temporary protection. We didn't immediately become a happy ending. That's not how real damage works. Some nights I still remembered the projector screen, still heard the audience gasping, still felt humiliation crawling under my skin. Trauma doesn't vanish because truth arrives later, but healing finally became possible. Slowly, painfully, humanly. Sandra started therapy. So did I. David claimed he deserved compensation for emotional labor and demanded free food every weekend. Honestly, he earned it. Months passed. Then one evening Sandra and I walked through a quiet street market downtown. No cameras, no lies, no pretending, just ordinary people buying fruit and arguing about prices. Sandra stopped beside a cheap jewelry stand and picked up a small silver ring. Nothing expensive, nothing dramatic. She looked at me carefully. "Do you ever think we were doomed from the beginning?" she asked softly. I thought about everything. The fake smiles, the betrayals, the humiliation, the fear, the survival. Then I looked at the woman beside me. Not the perfect version from social media, not the manipulative version from the stage. Just Sandra, flawed, broken, trying. And for the first time in a long time, I answered honestly. "No," I said quietly. "I think we were just a damaged people trying to look perfect while bleeding privately." Sandra cried silently. Not dramatic tears. The exhausted kind. The kind that arrives after surviving yourself. Then she asked me the question that mattered most. "Can you ever forgive me?" I stared ahead at the crowded street for a long moment. Forgiveness is strange. People think it arrives like lightning. Truthfully, it arrives like winter sunlight. Slow, careful, almost shy. "I don't know yet," I admitted. Sandra nodded painfully. And somehow that honesty felt more romantic than every fake perfect moment we ever posted online. We kept walking side by side while city lights reflected across wet pavement. No promises, no guarantees, just truth finally breathing between us. And as I watched strangers passing by us without noticing our scars, I realized something that still chills me to this day. The most dangerous relationships are not the loud toxic ones everybody warns you about. It's the beautiful ones, the ones people envy, the ones that look perfect from the outside while two people quietly drown inside them. Because sometimes the scariest lies are the smiles we rehearse together, and sometimes the coldest heartbreak comes from the person who once felt safest in your arms. But if I learned anything from loving Sandra, it's this: the truth always collects its debt eventually, and nothing is more terrifying than a perfect-looking relationship built on fear instead of love.